A judge in Georgia has just thrown out a lawsuit that was trying to strike down what I believe to be not only an unconstitutional gun law, but an illegal one as well. And it's not very often that I get to say that. And there's more. It's not very often I get to say this. I disagree with the law, but I agree with the idea behind it. What am I talking about? Guys, let's get into it. All right, so these are dangerous, choppy waters, and I recognize that up front. If someone who is vociferously pro-gun like myself is saying something as crazy and moronic on the internet, that he agrees with the idea behind it. What are we talking about? There is a law, there was an ordinance that was enacted down in Savannah, Georgia, that made it a crime punishable by up to $1,000 fine, up to 30 days in jail. Maybe they call it an ordinance, I don't know. Here in Wisconsin, to this Wisconsin boy, I hear that the police can put you behind bars. We call it a crime here, okay? So I'm just gonna call it a crime. They made it a crime if you leave a firearm in an unlocked car. I guess there have been something like 200 firearms stolen from unlocked cars down in Savannah, Georgia. And yes, that's a big problem, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, I agree with the notion that we should not be leaving firearms in unlocked cars because they should be on your hip. They should be on your backpack. They should be on your purse. But ideally, they should be on your hip. That's what I'm on about here. I don't like guns in cars, period, whether locked or otherwise. But I agree with the notion that, hey, yeah, you're potentially arming criminals. The better thing to do is to have them with you. But I also recognize the fact that putting laws and regulations into this is stupid, illegal, and unconstitutional, and I would never, ever, 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 ever in a million years suggest doing that, mainly for the reason that guns don't belong in cars. They belong on you. So let's just make that clear that I disagree with this ordinance because the very question of it is crazy to me that you're not carrying. However, I recognize the fact that there are also illegal places that are impossible to carry firearms into. An airport, for instance, beyond the point of security, courthouses, police stations, wherever they are in your particular state, your particular time and place, I recognize that these places exist and they occur. So does Mr. Clarence Belt. That's the plaintiff in this case, who is a combination, as I understand it, according to the news articles that I read, is a combination of at least partially disabled and not exactly of significant means. And now I'm deducing that by the fact that it sounds like he has a manual lock car. Younger audience members will have to Google that. But he doesn't just press a button and all the doors lock. Sounds like he's got to go around and lock them all. And he lives outside of town. When he comes to town to do some shopping or take care of business, it's a bit of a burden, to say the least, for him to shuffle around his car and lock everything up. So basically announced his attorney as part of filing this lawsuit, and it's part of the standing issue that we're going to be getting into later. I already said why this law is crazy, because firearms belong on you, not in your glove box or center console or under your front seat or something like that. But I also said that it's both illegal and unconstitutional. And someone fact check me on this if I've said this before in the comment section, but I don't think I've been able to say that before. Illegal and unconstitutional. Where am I coming up with this? Illegal. Georgia has a state preemption law. What is a state preemption law? A state preemption law basically makes it illegal for local municipalities. We're talking about towns, cities, villages, counties, to pass ordinances or code or whatever it is that they call it, but basically to pass law that restricts firearms more than they are restricted at the state level. So for instance, if your state does not have a magazine restriction of, hey, you can't have magazines that can contain more than 10 rounds in them, okay? Then your local municipality cannot pass a 9-round restriction. That would be an example of if your state had a state preemption law, it could not do that, okay? Now, it just so happens that the states that pass magazine restrictions are not the states with state preemption laws. So there's a bit of a self-serve there where you tend to have everything stack up one side of the column of pro-freedom or basically anti-freedom, which is what makes this so unusual, that we have an anti-gun law being passed in a pro-gun state that has the preemption, and that's the reason why I've never been able to call a law illegal as opposed to being unconstitutional, morally repugnant, or something else. it's illegal because it's in violation of the state preemption law. And I'm not the only one that has said that. The Attorney General for Georgia made that very clear in a letter back in May of 2024. But as I also said, I said that this is unconstitutional. Why? Because keep in mind, if there is a law or regulation that purports to burden the Second Amendment, a core Second Amendment activity, which going about carrying, transporting, possessing, if you're saying he's not carrying it, I'm going to get back to you in a moment here, but carrying, transporting, possessing a firearm certainly qualifies, then yes, now shifts the burden in court, now shifts to the government to prove that the regulation, the law in question, must fit within our nation's historical tradition of regulating firearms. When we're talking about this from the Brune decision, that's where we get this formula of how we determine whether or not firearm-related laws and regulations are constitutional or not. It comes from the United States Supreme Court, June of 2022 decision, Brune, B-R-U-E-N, which said that, look, number one, is the Second Amendment implicated? Number two, then, if it is, then it's up to the government to show that the purported regulation in question fits within the nation's historical tradition of regulating firearm laws, which pro-gunners like myself would want to take from the colonial era or early republic. So we're talking about basically up till 1830 and back. Anti-gunners are trying to push, thanks to the 14th Amendment, for about 1868, although some anti-gunners have said that our nation's historical tradition goes all the way to the 1990s. Quick math, if you're anti-guns, if you're pro-gun control, if you're anti-freedom, then you want the most recent date possible for what constitutes as falling within our nation's historical tradition of regulating firearm laws. If you're pro-freedom, pro-individual liberty, and all that other kind of good stuff, and I'm not making this a left and right thing. As you know, I basically never make this a left and right thing, okay? But if you're pro all those things, then you want an old one before all sorts of crazy regulations started to hit the books. And it's not good enough to find a single example of something that existed in some particular place, even if that some particular place was Chicago, LA, and New York, because it must be representative of the nation's historical tradition. Representative, not a lone outlier on some sort of chart. Okay, that's an important key and piece to the puzzle. The bottom line is that you're not going to find safe storage laws as part of the nation's historical tradition of regulating firearms. Doesn't matter if you go to the pro-gun colonial and early republic era, or if you go to the anti-gun Reconstruction era, 1860s, 1870s, something like that, around when the 14th Amendment was passed. If you want to know why that's important, let me know down in the comment section down below. I'm happy to tangent into that as a full video, so I don't have to hold you hostage right here. Really quickly, tell me about what you think about this. Is my analysis wrong? Am I off on the fact that, hey, guns shouldn't be stored in cars because it should be on you? I'm guessing I don't have a lot of people pushing back on that, but let's take this back a notch. Let's just say you can't bring it on you for whatever reason. Should governments be able to ban this, or are they just crazy, illegal, unconstitutional, and wrong? Let me know, because I understand we don't want to arm criminals. I get that. But I also, and more importantly, do not want to infringe on the Second Amendment. And by the way, are you buying this whole it's car versus a gun? This isn't a firearm regulation. This is a car regulation. Stick around in the video until you see that crazy argument come up. Be sure to hit that like button. Back to the video. Doesn't matter where you go to. You're not going to find a wave crashing down from coast to coast, from sea to shining sea, regulating whether or not firearms have to be locked up when you hitch up your horse, when you are closing the stagecoach and you're going into the general store or something like that. You're not going to find a crashing wave of those laws because they don't exist. It was not part of the nation's historical tradition. And that's kind of a problem for Savannah, Georgia. And no wonder why, as a result, they were arguing, hey, we're not regulating firearms. We're just regulating the car, right? That's it. This isn't about firearms. This isn't about the Second Amendment. This is about cars. That's what this is about. And that's just not me making this up. That's what their attorney has commented outside of court about what this case revolves around. Not guns in the Second Amendment, about cars. Well, I've got news for you. This isn't about cars. I mentioned before that carry is directly implicated. Why and how? If you're someone who is not wealthy enough to be able to afford the very latest in transportation, who's not wealthy enough to be able to afford multiple $1,000 fixes to cars every time something goes wrong with a car that maybe is more than 10 years old, you're the person who this law could be targeting. Because after all, if you don't have the wealth to fix your car, then how are you going to carry a firearm if you need to, for instance, go to the post office as part of a bunch of chores that you need to do? Can't carry a firearm in the post office, so what do you have to do? You've got to leave your gun in your car. Oh, but you can't. You can go to jail for 30 days if you leave your gun in your car, which means I guess poor people just have to break the law? Is that what this is? Is Georgia linking arms with HK and hating the poors? Because it certainly seems like that's what's going on here. By the way, I love you, HK. I'm carrying you right now. So that's as we speak. So love you, HK. But I got a meme. So you can see those problems start to develop there. You can absolutely see those problems start to develop there. Who tend to be poor? People who are disabled, racial minorities, youth. Does this mean that Georgia is knowingly, I'm not going to say intentionally, but we know who the poor are. Like, you don't have to have a degree in sociology in order to figure out who poor people are. You can probably Google that after you're done watching this video if you want to confirm this. Georgia legislators know this. Savannah legislators know this. They are knowingly passing laws that are going to be targeting racial ethnic minorities, people who are disabled, the young, people who are statistically more likely to be hit by this. Is that what they're after here? You know, a wise man once said that you can judge a law by its outcome. The outcome is this. Are you going to be getting a lot of 50-year-old doctors driving Mercedes with this law? Or are you getting a lot of poor, a lot of blacks, a lot of disabled, a lot of folks with difficulty with access to resources and privilege? Is that what you want, Savannah? Is that what you're going for? Is this really about the cars or is it about something else? I don't know. Because if you just look at the outcome, that's the predictable outcome. And this isn't a situation as well, by the way, where only exists on the books and it's never going to be getting enforced. There have been multiple citations written for this. Multiple people could already be spending up to a month in jail. Is that what you want? I hope not. Ultimately, this lawsuit got thrown out because the judge said that the plaintiff, Mr. Clarence Beltz, lacks standing. Standing is something you need to have in civil lawsuits. You can't just sue anyone at any time for any reason. You have to have standing to do so. I guess what the judge wants in this particular case, and I wasn't in the courtroom, so I don't know, but they actually want Mr. Beltz to get himself arrested or ticketed on this. Is that what's going to take? If you want me to follow up to see where this lawsuit goes, does it get appealed? Does it get refiled with new plaintiffs? What are the next steps? Let me know down in the comment field down below. If you've got tips or know more about this or any other interesting lawsuits around the country, be sure to drop us a line. You will figure out how, one way or another, I am sure. We appreciate you sticking around. Let's go to our quote of the day. Be sure to hit that like button, and I look forward to reading the comments on this as I do in all of our videos. This quote of the day comes from Seneca, Roman thought scholar. Quote, "All cruelty springs from weakness." There you go. All cruelty springs from weakness. Another great quote. I appreciate you sticking around with me for this long, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.